You probably didn't know this, or maybe you did, but your voice has the power to influence how people see you and what people think about you. And that's what we're going to be diving into in today's conversation on the show. I'm your host, Deidre Sirianni, and I am so excited to dive into this conversation around voice because it's very much connected to your influence, to your power, to your message, to your business, to your story. And if you are someone who's wanting to step on stages, make a bigger impact in the world, and get your message out there, it is so important for you to understand the power of your voice. First of all, we want to be able to use our voice. So having a platform, whether it's a podcast, a stage, or whatever it may be, where you are using your voice and sharing your story and your message and your gifts is important because we have the power to use our voice to create change in the world. But also, if you haven't learned how to use the instrument of your voice so that it impacts people in the way you want it to, it could be giving a message completely different than what you are saying out loud. I'm going to say that again. Your voice, the sound of your voice, the way that you use your voice can be giving a completely different message than what you are actually saying out loud. And this is why it's so important to learn how to use your voice in a way that communicates your authority, communicates the value and the weight of what you're bringing, and also resonates in people's bodies. So about 5, 6 years ago, I was prepping for doing my TEDx, and my TEDx was on, it's called Unhealed Trauma, the Root Cause of All Suffering. And while I was preparing to do that talk, you have to essentially know word for word. You need to memorize a script when you are doing a TEDx, or at least it was like that when I was preparing for my TEDx. And I started to notice that my voice was really high and I talked really fast. And a lot of the sentences that I said sounded like a question, even though they were a statement. And how this was brought to my attention was through an acting coach that I was working with. And I wasn't fully in my body. I was in my upper body, you could say chest up area for my voice, my sound, my resonance. We have different parts of the body that we can access when we're speaking. And what tends to happen mainly with women, but this can also happen with men, is oftentimes we can speak in our upper part of our body, which makes us sound higher pitched, higher frequency, and as a result, we're not able to sound like we are wanting to or taken seriously. So I want you to take a moment right now, and I want you to think of someone that maybe you follow on social media, or maybe someone you've seen on stage, someone you've heard on a podcast, and you're like, they're really lovely, but I can't really stand listening to them, right? There's something about the frequency of their voice that just doesn't. And so there's something about their voice that is not resonating in your physical body. So when I'm working with speakers in Speak to Scale in my program where I teach and mentor people who want to make a bigger impact in the world and grow their business, we work on the voice as a part of getting ready to prepare for podcast interviews, getting ready to step on a stage, and also having that awareness of what our voice is communicating beyond the words that we're saying. So I want to drop in a little bit deeper to this. So there's psychology behind how people see us, the visuals, right? So how we look gives a message. And I want to dive into that a little bit in today's conversation too. So how we look, how we represent ourselves on an aesthetic level when we're on stage or in front of people, people get an impression from that, right? So that's a first impression, a visual impression. Then there's the words that we say, right? There's the words that we say, how often we speak, our body language, are our shoulders shrugged forward? How are we standing? Do we have our hands together? All of these things, right? Like, what are we doing with our body? There's the words that we say, but more importantly than the words that you say is your voice, because people won't hear the words that you say or register it if your voice is telling them that you don't trust what you're saying and you're up here and your words end with a sentence or your sentences end soft and people can't really hear you. So I wanted to give a couple demos there of how our voice, learning to speak from a place of power, influence, and also accessing the full range of our voice can make a huge impact from stage and also in our businesses. So, as I was saying, as I was prepping for my TED Talk, 5, 6 years ago, and I was speaking on trauma. And this trauma that I was sharing from stage, and I've talked about this in a previous episode more about the journey of bringing that message to stage. And this was before trauma was really talked about. It was before the movement of trauma was really mainstream, you could say. I was afraid. I was afraid to share a very vulnerable message from stage. And I knew that it was going to reach hundreds and thousands of people. So there was that too. There was a bit of the fear of sharing a story that was very traumatic to me, but also I knew that in order for me, if I shared that story, the impact it would have. So it felt like an initiation into what I was here to do at the time. And so a lot of the time, as we step into our next level of leadership and we are sharing our stories to impact and serve others, to grow our business, to make a bigger impact, to help others heal and show them the pathway forward that we've taken and invite them on that journey, we can reach these levels of, oh, okay, yeah, on an intellectual level, I know I need to share this story. I know it's important for me to speak on that stage or that podcast or put myself out there. But then on more of a subconscious, energetic level, our voice is actually broadcasting our traumas and our fears and the things that we have not yet brought to light. And it's interesting, um, as I'm sharing this a little bit, my throat is a little bit, not 100%. I was sick for about a month and it was really impacting my voice. So if it sounds a little off today, that is why. But it was important for me to record this podcast episode. So with that, our voice illuminates our subconscious beliefs about ourselves and how safe we feel being seen, being heard, being taken seriously. And so I was practicing for my TEDx. I was working with an acting coach at the time, and my voice was really high. And I had a bit of I think they call it a valley girl, is kind of what I've heard, when I was going up in my speech. And I was energetically and vocally apologizing for what I was saying. And when I did some of the deeper work on this with my voice and also on an emotional level, it brought me back to a time when I was young. I grew up with two older brothers and I was the youngest of three and I wasn't really taken seriously. So if you're the youngest of, in your family, you may not be taken seriously. You may have a similar experience to me. I know birth order is a thing. People have different experiences based on their birth order. And I just wasn't really taken seriously. And one of my brothers would always tap his hand on the top of my head and say, "Oh, little bird, Deidre." It's so funny saying that out loud. He'd be like, "Oh, Deidre bird, tap, 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 tap." I just wasn't taken seriously. If I was mad, if I was sad, if I had something to say, I wasn't taken seriously. So how do you think that showed up in my life? Well, how it showed up on a pattern level was I needed to prove myself. I wanted to be heard. I wanted to be taken seriously. And I went down this path of being so serious and, people need to hear what I have to say. And anytime someone told me I couldn't do something in my life, I would go and do it just to prove them wrong. So I guess in a way, I was probably more trying to prove to myself that I could be taken seriously and that I mattered than other people. Anyways, flash forward, practicing my TEDx. We're probably about three weeks out from being on stage, and I'm working on my voice. And I never really knew anything about the voice, the quality of the voice, and how it would show up. So I did some of this deeper work around understanding, okay, I wasn't taken seriously growing up. I'm the youngest, I'm the girl of the family. And how did that make me feel? What made me feel like people didn't want to hear what I had to say. I didn't feel like I was taken seriously. And so how that was showing up with my voice when I had a really powerful message to share from stage around trauma and really helping women understand their intuition and heal from trauma and bring voice to what happened to me and what's happened to so many others is that my voice was doing a thing that was essentially saying, you're probably not going to take me seriously, so I'm going to apologize for talking. And so what I had to do was, number one, I did the deeper work of being like, okay, this comes from childhood. This is a pattern. It's showing up in my voice. And I had to really connect with myself and remind myself why I was bringing that message forward and who that message was for. That message, oh, wow, I'm feeling a little emotional as I'm saying this. The message that I had to share from that TEDx was really for women who had been voiceless, women who didn't trust their intuition, and women who undergone rape, essentially. That was what my story was about, and how I shoved that trauma down for close to a decade, shamed myself for what happened to me, and felt uncomfortable around men, and literally hid my body as much as possible for about 10 years. And that showed up as physical body shame, that showed up as feeling like it was my fault and trying to hide being attractive in any way because I had a fear that would happen again. So the trauma impacted me on so many levels. And I essentially started to betray myself all the time, where I didn't trust myself anymore. I didn't feel worthy of love. And I felt like something was wrong with me because of that trauma. So the why behind my story, behind sharing that vulnerable story from stage and what I learned from it and how unhealed trauma is the root cause of all suffering, at least that was my talk at the time. I'd have probably a different story around that now, because I think it's the power of our choice, and what we do with that story, what we do with our pain is actually how we heal trauma for ourselves, and we step into the light and we get out of shame, which has to do with healing our trauma, but more about owning our story and owning all parts of who we are. I don't think I'm going to do another TEDx, but if I were to, that might be it. So back to what I was saying, is that I had to remind myself of why I was bringing that story to stage. And I was thinking about my younger self who needed to hear it, and how that would have helped that younger version of me heal and know that it wasn't my fault, and also understand what happened to me is something that has happened to many other people, and there's a pathway forward to healing it. And just because there's so much shame around that. So for me, it was a layered experience. I had to understand, why am I apologizing in my voice? First, we have to have the awareness of, what does our voice sound like, right? What are we doing with our voice from stage, from podcasting, from when we're in front of people or talking in general? And the second piece for me was like, well, what do I need to share, and who needs to hear this? Who is this for? And if I'm speaking for that younger woman who is going through this or might go through it, then I need to show up in my power. I can't, you know, dabble. I can't be wish-washy with a message that needs to be heard. I can't be apologizing up here with a question mark at the end of my sentences, hoping that people are going to feel the message, that what has been happening for years isn't okay, and it's time for women to reclaim their voice, right? So there's those first two steps with understanding our voice and how your voice may be showing up. And we do some processing of this specifically in my program, Speak to Scale. If you're looking into making a bigger impact in the world with your gifts and your message, that program is incredible. And we do some work on the voice, because the voice is the vehicle that brings your message to light and impacts people's bodies and souls. And if our voice is not working the way we need it to work, if we have not trained our voice and we don't have that awareness of how we're coming across, your very special and important message that is here to help people, maybe going over people's heads, or people for some subconscious reason that they may not understand, might not trust you because your voice is out of resonance with what you're saying or what you stand for. And so that's why we want to get everything in alignment. We want to get our voice in alignment. We want to get our story in alignment. We want to get our educating and inspiring parts of what we do when we're speaking in alignment, so that when you are communicating your message from stage, you're taken seriously, you're heard, you're felt, you're understood, and that the people who need your message and your gifts and your work take radical action to work with you and go deeper on the journey, rather than being like, I liked what she said, I liked her story, but I don't know. I just don't know if she can help me. So there's a lot of psychology in why people buy from you and why people don't buy from you, how people take you seriously and why people are not taking you seriously. And a big part of it has to do with your voice, your story, your stage presence. There's so many layers to it, but today is really about the voice. So there's some things that um, essentially say that you don't feel like your message matters. And one of them is talking really high. That voice, that frequency of sound cannot land in people's bodies and will give people anxiety or make their ears hurt. It's just fact. I hate to say it, but it's just the truth. It's hard to hear someone who's up here. And it's hard to catch up with them because when someone's talking really high and they're speaking really fast, we can't ground that into the body. And if we can't ground it into the body, we can't do anything with it. So a couple of things that you can do right now to ask yourself if you are using your voice in a way that is effective is to ask yourself, do you feel like people are taking what you're saying seriously? Or do you feel like you're being brushed off or not heard? Are people talking over you when you're speaking? That is a true sign that you are not owning your voice. This could just be in a one-to-one conversation or small groups. Do you feel like if you're on stage or on a podcast or speaking to people, that people are tuning out or they didn't really hear what you said? They're not remembering your words. Do you feel like or know that people are not taking the next step with you on sales calls? Or when you're on stage or when you're putting yourself out there, do you feel like for whatever reason, they don't trust your authority? They don't trust that you can give them results. And that could have to do with maybe your product or your sales process. I'm not sure. But it could very much have to do with your voice. So if you are experiencing any of these symptoms of I'm not feeling taken seriously, I don't feel like people are really hearing what I have to say, or people aren't taking that next step to want to work with me, it could be because of your voice. I know it's wild, but it's the truth. The voice is the messenger. And if you are saying something really impactful, but you are not finishing your sentences, you're not completing your sentences, or you're running out of voice at the end of your sentence, or the end of your sentence is high pitched like a question mark, you are translating to an audience or to people in relationships that you are in that what you are saying doesn't matter. Even if you believe on a very deep soul level that the message that you have to give can change people's lives. And this is the power of owning your voice and learning how to use it. I was in conversation with someone the other day, and she was telling me how she talks really high, that she's a really high-pitched speaker. She talks really fast and has all this excitement, and what that can look like from stage. And again, I'm not trying to offend anyone because I used to be like this, okay? This used to be me. is a lot of people are going to think you're cute and that was nice and you have nice energy, but they're not going to potentially hire you. So getting your voice in alignment with your message and what you're doing from stage and podcasts and platforms and just in your relationships in general and your life will make a drastic change. Because if you are someone who is called to make an impact in the world, owning your voice and learning how to use it is everything. And part of it has to do with step one, understanding, where do these patterns come from? When in my life have I been told potentially that what I have to say doesn't matter or I'm not taken seriously, or that I shouldn't have space to talk, or if I really share and use my voice, that I'm bad or I'm wrong or I'm not ladylike or I'm not this, I'm not that, whatever the story is. So that's step one. Step two is to remind yourself of why you're doing what you do and what your message is and who it's here to help, similar to what I went through. And then number three is actually learning how to use your voice in a way that resonates in people's bodies, gets them to feel something, and gets them to take massive inspired action. And that is what we do inside of the program, among many other things of helping you with your messaging, your talk, your story, and getting you on platforms so that you can get your message out there in a bigger way. So I hope today's episode has resonated with you. I hope you got value from it. And the question that I have for you today is, what is the message that your voice is communicating beyond your words? And what is the message that you wanted to communicate? I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to get in touch. If you've been enjoying this episode so far and the podcast, please go ahead and subscribe and make sure to leave a review. Every single review matters and means so much. And when you submit a review, and you take a screenshot and you email it to us at the email below, you will be entered in to win a very special prize as a thank you for taking the time to leave a review. Thanks again for listening, sending you lots of love, and looking forward to dropping the next episode with you next week. Mwah.